come up here and tell us about Elliots Park, some of the other interesting things that he knows of the historical part of Matheson. And we're just thankful that you're with us tonight, and we're looking forward to an interesting talk.
Well, why don't you have a rain date just in case it rains on Saturday?
For that
Moving.
well, yeah, we'll probably have to do that.
Perhaps what I could say, we will have permission to go through the corridor in the back here if it does rain. And it's mostly the big things that need to be moved, the pieces of furniture that are there. We do have a couple of dollies, you won't have to carry them on your back. And there are some boxes still to be there. If you've looked into the storage room, you see that most of the smaller artifacts are already moved over here. But we do have some bigger pieces and one nice big display case. And, but there is equipment with wheels.
Yeah, and so there's a nice passageway.
It is a little shorter to go around that way, but if it rains, we'll go that way.
Okay, good suggestion, thank you for that. Okay, we're kind of calling you now to share with us.
Hi, I'm Dana, and we're going to do this in a very informal way. If anybody has any questions at any time, just put your hand up, interrupt, fine, because that's the time to think about it and discuss it. And if you don't say it then, you might forget about it, and I won't have to have something to talk about. So, we're off and running. I'd like the proverbial old story, the potato, the best part of the family is underground. So, we're off and running now. These are the old beer mugs from Elliots Park. Now, even back then, they had false bottoms in the rascals. I'll pass them around, and you can take a look at them. And believe it or not, beer sold for a nickel a glass. That doesn't sound like much. But the man of the house worked for a dime a day. If you can, I mean, a dime an hour. And they worked 10 hours. And that is roughly $1 a day. And beer is a nickel a glass. So it's kind of expensive beer.
What date was this?
Those are the old violet beer glasses that my son James found these in the creek. The ones that were in the old dump down there had filled up with water, and all of them were broken.
Did they turn violet or?
No, they were made that way.
What year was that?
Well, we ran from, what was it, about 1890 to 1913. So I have no idea what the dates are on these mugs. There's no stamp on them, there's nothing. They're just, they're mass produced, and you can see they're molded glass. They weren't stamped like the things are today. They were put in molds, and that was it. So I'll pass out a bunch of pictures here. I think that you should have most of them. But I gave a bunch of them to Hank Youngie, and he promised to duplicate them and then give you all this stuff back again. So we'll start out with the gateway into Elliots Park over the ravine and a little pass that they used on the railroad. Now some of these are self-explanatory. You can tell that that's the dancing pavilion. Here's the, no, you pass them around. The bridge over the ravine, which is located just about 200 yards west of the Speedway gas station now. That is going down into the woods. And here we have another shot of the dancing pavilion. And I'll show two shots in a row here. That is the open area where they had meetings, forums, and everything. You can see the merry-go-round on the corner. Now here's the same section where there's action. There's a lot of people there. What was going on, I have no way of knowing. But they used to have Scotch picnics, union picnics, and they would have anywhere from 20 to 30,000 people there on a Sunday. Go ahead.
Besides some of these bigger events, did people regularly go, you know, like for a Sunday afternoon there?
Oh, yeah,
or
yeah.
picnicking?
The people would come out from Chicago, they ran special trains during the big events, but there was always the picnic train coming out from Chicago. There were about 4 of them a day,
Is that right?
and that was a special run. Now,
Are these employees?
those are all employees right there. Moses is third from, that's my grandfather, is third from the left.
And we have the butcher or the waiter or in the white uniform?
If you can read real close, you can see the prices in the background there too. But those were the cooks that were in the white outfits and everything. No, I had a hard time too. I had to get a magnifying glass out. Now this picture of the railroad is the IC before it was elevated. It was 2 lines, and now they're back down to it again. So we have made dramatic progress. That's about where Hammer subdivision was. It's about, that picture was taken about 200 feet north of Route 30, right on the IC.
What is Sunday?
I have no idea.
They used to have
No.
a turnabout in Madison too, where I see you turn up the engine around.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Now, they used to have some pretty fancy parades around here too. And these are pictures of some of the floats that were decorated by the different churches, different organizations. And that's the old Elliot house, a picture of it. Now, that is not the old house. This is what they say is the servants' quarter. And it's 2 houses put together. So, well, this goes back again. And this is where you can see the open areas there, and they would have wagon races and things like that, starting at one end and going to the other. And that's just the more of the family area there. Now some of these are pictures of the pond and the creek. Now this is the pond, 2 shots of the pond.
Boys used to go down there skiing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What kind of wildlife or animal life did they have in the park?
Oh, we had a deer park. There were about 30 deer that they kept, and the fun part of it was to feed the darn deer during the winter, and that was my father's job. And so he talked John Elliot into helping him out. The 2 of them would get a wagon, hitch up the thing, and take off. Now, see, that's
Dana, is
Yeah.
this the house that was there in, say, in the 50s?
Yeah,
that's the old house. It's still there. It's still there.
Still there, yeah.
Yeah, it's still there.
Oh, that's the one that's painted green.
Yeah, painted green now.
Right, it's way, it's,
More of the pond.
Chocolate covered.
One street back parallel to Lake Road.
And this is the
North
cricket.
of
Way
30.
back in that.
North of 30. It's on the north side of the street.
Now, I have one here that's got a log cabin in it. Now, that log cabin was built by the Conley boys so that it could stay warm when they were fishing and ice skating. And the pond that is down there was dammed up. Part of the creek was cut through, and the pond was dammed up. There were 2 good springs in there. One was an artesian, and even when I was a boy, it had a bubble about this high off the ground. I mean, off the water. And the pond water was just as fresh as it could be. You could drink anything out of it. During World War II, Wilmington blew up, and that shut off every spring in the area. Everything just went dry. And wells had to be redug. Most of the wells in Madison that were 50, 60 feet had to go down 150 feet.
what blew up?
Wilmington, the arsenal.
Oh.
She went up one afternoon, and not one word of it hit the newspaper, because it was supposedly top secret. Now, let's see. That little one down there, I told you about the log cabin. I took a picture of that with me when I was in service, And I would ask guys, do you know where this is taken? Oh, you know, Kentucky or Tennessee or someplace like that. I said, no, 32 miles south of Chicago. They couldn't believe it. But there's the old log cabin. We used to have a stove in there, and it was wonderful when we went skating down there. That is one of the best skating ponds that was, and now we can't use it anymore.
And this is a pond, I
Yeah.
Why can't you use it?
Well, it's Park District property, and they have a sign, no swimming and no skating. The darn pond is only about 1.5 feet. So I don't know why they don't want us to use it for skating.
Slow down.
It's,
You mean over there by the water place?
no, it's right, you know where Evergreen is?
Yeah.
All right, go right straight down from Evergreen, and you'll come right to the sign and go about 100 feet west of the turnaround down there at the bottom of the hill, and there'll be the pond. So, it's full now, first time in a long time.
That's the one with all the bulrushes in it, huh?
Oh, yeah, we've got rushes, a lot of water lilies. We just covered last year with water lilies, and then the water disappeared, you know, it dried up, and they're back again, though. They're coming out in full force.
Water lilies here too.
Yeah. But they used to go down there in the wintertime and cut ice and store it in the ice house, and then use that ice during the summertime for the beer and refrigeration in general. But that's, and not only that, but half of Madison got ice from the pond too, because that was one of the best sources of pure water there was. I don't know what happened to all of the buildings that were there. I imagine they just fell down. When I first came to town here, there was still part of the old merry-go-round laying out there. And there were a few old wooden horses, and they were so badly just, you know, decayed that there was no sense in even trying to salvage any of them. We had a dance hall at the park, actually a beer garden, and they had horseshoe ring tosses, and they had different try your skill deals and things like that. My father and John Elliot were expected to run the, should we say, the con games, because that's exactly what they are. If you ever tried, it's just like a carnival. If you ever tried to beat those ring tosses, you can't do it. They're set up in such a way that your money's gone before you even know it. But the carnival employed about 20 people. And for Madison, that was a lot of people. And the farmers would work, and then on Saturday and Sunday, they would come into the park, and it was gravy money for them, because they could, their work in the farm was done. And don't forget, the farms weren't as big as they are today, but it was all done by horse. And they'd come in town and swap horses and everything else. We had a lot of fun doing that. That's what my father used to say, because these, yes?
We had the grain elevator in town too.
Oh, yeah, we had 3 of them. In fact, I think Steggy had a grain elevator, am I not right on that? Steggy got a grain elevator?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it blew up one day. One of them blew up, let's put it that way. But we had a lot of fun in this town. The volunteer fire department were very busy that day. But the farmers would come in, trade everything. It was like a barter night. It was like a town meeting and a picnic all rolled into one. And politics was rampant. It was fun to listen to some of the old timers talk about how people would come over and buy a whole barrel of beer. And, you know, it was just wild to get elected to these different jobs. So, they had good competition back in the old days. I understand that doesn't happen anymore. No one buys any beer for anybody.
Plenty of cash.
Now, then the one going around here, that's the cemetery, and it's shot from the southeast corner, shooting northwest. And the Lutheran cemetery is in the background, or field for the cemeteries in the background. If you'll notice, every one of those pine trees is gone. And we have different trees in there now. But the arborvitae that are in there are still there. And they're over, let's see, it'd be about 120 years. So, if anyone's interested, we have about, see, 6 generations buried there. So, what? I'm sorry.
How did you happen to get that as a family cemetery?
Well, like everything else, James Elliot knew that we were going to die sooner or later, and he had his mother and father with him in Chicago, and when they came out here, I guess they were getting pretty up in age, and he had the state legislature dedicate the cemetery. So it's by act of state legislation. It's not just something that someone put together, but it's by act of legislation.
Well, that was part of the Elliot property, wasn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. I think the Lupin Cemetery was part of the Elliot property too, and for the life of me, I can't find out whether it was given to them or it was sold to them. I have no idea, and nobody can come up with any figures. But that was,
Is that your church?
what?
Is that your church?
No, I'm a Presbyterian.
That's
My
what I
wife
was
is
wondering,
Lutheran.
you know, if you were Lutherans, you might have given it to them.
Oh, I should go back on that and explain, when the Elliots first moved out here, they were about the only non-German. And we were strictly the Verdammt Englander. And my father was a good athlete, and he played a good game of baseball and football, and all the neighborhood kids played together, and the hard feelings like that started to wear off. And it's no longer that way. In fact, my wife belongs to the Lutheran church right now. If my grandfather would hear that, he'd turn over his grave. But they were all Presbyterian. We were over here at the Monkey Fields Village Hall voting in the last election, and somebody said, your grandfather was a good friend of Abraham Lincoln. And I said, yeah. And he said, I suppose you're staunch Republicans because of that. And I said, no, if Lincoln was alive today, he'd be a Democrat. So, it's weird the way politics have flip-flopped. Stephen Douglas was a champion of states' rights. And Lincoln was for the little guy, the poor man, and he wanted to liberalize a lot of the things. Well, turning the slaves loose was one of them. And the wealthy landowners didn't cotton to that too much, so they supported Stephen Douglas, the little giant, and Lincoln naturally got the popular support. You wonder why they would be friends like that and get along, but in the areas of this neck of the woods, there were so few places that you could stay with 4 or 5 people and have a room. There were hotels and places like that, but they were all filled up all the time. Believe it or not, these hotels did a darn good business around here. We had 2 trains going through. We had from the 3 lines going through. The Michigan, EJ&E, and the IC, which was the big one. And the drummers would stop off here, and they would take the trains back and forth on the different routes. It was the only way around Chicago for a lot of them, because they didn't want to go into Chicago, and they would simply pull out here and go into one of the hotels. And there usually wasn't room for the bigwigs. So the people that had large houses would put them up. And it didn't make any difference whether you were of that man's political party or not, because you realized that if you were going to have a debate, you had to have both sides there. If one guy showed up, there was no debate. So everybody got into the act, and you put people up in the houses. And not only that, you provided transportation for them to the best of your ability. And it wasn't too unusual when things got a little tight, to have two political parties in one wagon. And it made it interesting sometimes, from what I gather. In the old days, they took their politics pretty seriously. Fist fights were not uncommon. But anyway, it's so different now than then. When the Elliots would go into town to vote, they would take their servants with them. Each servant carried a shotgun, and they voted. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten near the polls, because the Elliots were Democrats, and Madison was Republican, and you didn't bother with it. They didn't like those few opposition votes cast against them. So it was fun. But I can remember my father saying, Mose, his father, would get so mad that they'd have to go in and vote that way. He said, why don't we just forget about voting? And I guess James Elliot told him, you will vote. So that was it. Father's word was law. Now, does anyone have any question about Elliots Park or anything like that? Yeah.
Is that a hill known as Indian Hill? You know which one I mean?
Oh,
Is that debris from the park, or is that an old Indian Hill?
that is an old Indian mound, and we have no idea what it was for. It is not a burial mound.
Right, it's been dug into over years.
Oh, yeah, people have dug crisscrossed and everything else like that, but it is not a burial mound. Now, there have been caches of weapons and tools found there, because my dad came home one time when he lived in the old house over there, and he had a whole bunch of scrapers, tomahawks, axes, things like that. We still have them at home. And John Elliot came in one time with a great big axe like this. It had to be ceremonial, because it couldn't have been used for anything else. It was just too darn heavy. They used it as a doorstop in their house for 20-some years. But that was just the way it goes. But there, as far as I know, there is an Indian village over there in Hammer subdivision. You know where the old pumping station used to be?
No, but I know where Hammers used to live.
Yeah, well, it's straight north of Hammer's place, and where the creek comes out from underneath the icy tracks, there used to be an Indian village in there.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, and my son James has gotten old pottery fragments, a lot of arrowheads, flints, you name it, and it's as far as we can figure out, it was abandoned about maybe 300 years ago.
You don't know what the tribe or anything.
What?
You don't know what tribe
No,
or
no. There were an awful lot of Indian tribes moving through this area. The Potawatomi were most noted, but you had everything. The Kickapoos, I can't remember the name of all of them, but it was a melting pot. The Sauk Trail was busy, and that's why it's as famous as it is, because the Indians used it and they traveled in peace. When you were traveling like that, you were in peace. It was when you moved into another person's area and you decided to stay there that things got exciting. So I guess it's that way today. The heck, if you invade another country, you get kind of rough. Now, I don't know how long I've been talking or anything else like that, but Madison has come a long, long way from when we first moved out here. Some of it good, some of it bad. When we first moved out here, my wife and I had been married, I think it was about 3 years, and we decided to take a vacation. We went up to Saugatuck. And we left with our small son, and we didn't have a lock on the back door. Just walked out, left the back door closed, and that was it. We got back, nothing bothered, nothing. Everything was just the way it was. The rifles and shotguns were still on the walls. You try that today, you won't have any walls left. But it's sort of sad to see the community spirit that Madison had kind of wither away. It's whether we're getting too impersonal or we don't know, but you know everybody in town. Heck, not only that, the kids had to behave, because so-and-so would see them do something wrong, and they wouldn't bother. They'd go and tell the kid, now look, you little so-and-so, you behave. And the kid knew better than sass anyone back, because father would be coming home and he'd know about it and he'd get it. and that would be it. It was instant retribution. If you goofed off and got caught, heaven help you. They used to work together, even providing free bananas and stuff like that. The kids that hit the IC on the way out here, they'd stop. And the reason they'd stop is they'd go down to Long's Tavern, that's where Maloney's is now, and have a couple of beers and then get into Chicago. And it was a nice stop. Well, meanwhile, the kids in town are going to help themselves with all the bananas. Bananas were a luxury around here. But Madison always had plenty of bananas. And of course, every now and then, why somebody would forget to get off the train and be halfway into Chicago at the next stop and have to walk back. Well, you learned not to goof off. I don't know if it ever happened to my father or not, but he's told stories of guys getting home 2 o'clock in the morning for missing the afternoon train. So, there you are. I don't know what to say about the development of Madison. It came up like a mushroom almost right after World War II, why we had the O'Connor subdivisions come in, and those houses were sold for the fantastic figure of $12,000, $12,800 a piece, and the interest rate was 4%, and that was a lot of money to come up with. And now those O'Connor houses, I think, are selling for about $95,000, and the interest rate is 8%. Everyone thinks it's wonderful. So it's difficult to sit up here and try to go through a lot of the things the old timers do around here. I wish I could remember half of what Rudy Adams told me. His father, that is, not young Rudy. And some of the old timers that were here, Heine Grunts, we went out in the Elliots Park, and he thought he could locate the old wells, and
There's one over there, I've seen it.
oh yeah, there's 3 of them in there. I know where they're at now. And they're deep, they're still open. And the developers won't cover them up. It's just a question of time till some kid falls in there, and that's it. But one of them is about 30 feet deep, and the walls are crumbling. I wouldn't care to get in it, because it's a death trap. Yeah.
Was it your father that gave the land for scout use over by the Legion?
No, that was my cousin John.
And John.
That was John Elliot. That was one of the Elliot subdivision lots. The Elliots had 400 acres here, and they decided to subdivide west of the IC up to Main Street, and from Front Street all the way to, what the heck was it, up to Detmering subdivision. And they subdivided and had those lots, and naturally after the Depression hit, nobody was buying any lots. So the Boy Scouts needed a space for a cabin. They were meeting in one of the church basements, and they had too many kids for the church basement. They were, you know, you can't have a flock of boys running around and trying to conduct choir service upstairs at the same time. So it became apparent that the Boy Scouts had to have a cabin. So John Elliot didn't donate the land, he leased it to him for $1 for 99 years. And they built a log cabin up there. They had a field stone fireplace. They had poured concrete floors. There were no toilet facilities in it at all. They had to go to the Legion for that. But it was a place where they could store their equipment and could meet in relative peace and quiet. I remember going over there with Freeman Elliott, and it was quite a nice layout. It was clean, it was laid out right, and you could heat it in the wintertime, and the boys didn't think anything of going out and walking 3 or 4 miles for wood so they could heat the Boy Scout cabin. They walked down to the woods and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until they got enough wood to heat the place. But like the saying goes, they didn't get in much mischief that way. So they were active and busy, but they were in good hands. Yeah.
You know if the village still has title to it?
I don't know how that's going to work out. The taxes have not been paid on it, and I imagine the village picked it up under that deal. But what the village is going to do with it, I don't know, because the rest of the land was purchased by the Legion future expansion. And at one time, we were gonna put a swimming pool in. And then we lost our slot machines, as everybody knows, and that was the end of the swimming pool. But, the land, that lot is non-buildable. It's, was it 34 by 75? So the Legion, asked the village if they could have a lot and maintain it, and we'd maintain it anyway. Otherwise, it would look like a heck, because the village, hasn't maintained it. So the Legion's been maintaining the lot, and it's just there to look at. On Memorial Day, we, let people sit on the grass over there because, we have an overflow crowd.
I was told that the fireplace in the scout cabin was built by Stoll family
Bud stove.
and the stone came from the World's Fair.
No, the stone came from the IC.
I see.
Dallas.
Shortly before that, when the WPA was putting the concrete tile in the creek, there was a heavy rain and a section of the elevated IC collapsed. And when the IC filled that in, they put some granite stones on the surface. And that was the time they were building the Boy Scout cabin, and the Boy Scouts got permission to take enough of that stone to build the fire pit.
And it was all ballast stone.
Yeah,
And, Stoll and.
Buddy Stoll?
no, his dad.
Oh,
His
oh, his
father's
dad.
father. My buddy was.
I was gonna say, he was off the yard.
Well,
He was a brand new Boy Scout about that time.
You said John Elliot was
36,
a scout?
37.
yeah. No,
He was a fellow lion.
oh yeah, John was active in the Lions Club.
He had a meeting.
Yeah, yeah. And, well, let's see, for the, I can't think, the Illinois school, not the Illinois school, but the school is, well, right by Gerloff's house, where the, Miss Madison School? I can never remember the name of it, and it should pop right out. But I try to call it the Illinois school, and then way in the Park Forest. But, that was, built on, Elliots property, and they wanted to know how much, we were gonna charge them for the lots. And, my lawyer came along with me, and I told the board what we wanted for the lots. And the lawyer looked at me and said, "What'd you bring me for?" And I said, "To make sure everything was going the way it's supposed to go." He said, "Heck," he said, "you're giving them away." So, didn't argue with that. But our school taxes didn't go up that very much that year. So, and the land was just sitting there, we're just paying taxes on it, so what the heck. We did have, the family did have 400 acres at, one time. That was what, James Elliot bought out here. And I think there's only 2 acres left in the family.
What did he buy it for originally?
Originally, it was farmland, and this was heavily timbered. And James was in, the lumber business. And he figured he could make, and it was right close to the IC railroad, and ground level, he could load that stuff easy as heck with the horses they had. And they just simply put a couple ropes and just roll them right up. And he figured he'd clear it out, and the woods has been cut. This is not prime, this is not virgin territory, this is secondary. It's all secondary woods that you see down there.
Freeman had said that the old barn was built with lumber from that sawmill.
And that was one of the old barn was one of the biggest barns in South Cook County, and it was huge. I remember playing there as a kid, and Freeman had cattle, well, he had cows, sheep, and the old sheep barns. By the way, some number tells you the water doesn't get deep around this neck of the woods. I've seen the sheep barns under about 4.5 feet of water, and they were down in the valley. One time when the IC got plugged up over here, we had water on top of Governor's Highway. So anyone's got a house in that valley down there, I don't know. It's built in the floodplain as far as I'm concerned. But we kids used to play up there in the hay and everything. It made a beautiful playground for kids. And the day that it caught fire, Dimple called me up and she said, "Charlie came up and said the barn's on fire." Well, I ran over to the barn, and I've had a fire extinguisher by the back door, because, being out in the woods where we were, why, you had to get your fire out in a hurry if you had one, because the volunteer fire department would be there. But in the first 10 minutes of the fire, that's the most important part. And if I grabbed that sucker, the barn would probably still be there today. But it would have been a very dangerous thing to have still around, because it was too much of a temptation for the little kids like myself, 8, 9-year-old kids.
It was a lot of fun.
Oh, and now it was a lot of fun.
Whatever happened to the antique auto that they used to drive in the parade?
No, John gave that to the Legion, with the understanding that, if they didn't want it, he was gonna get it back. Well, when John died, why, that went up for grabs, and the Legion, used to have it in parades. We used to have a lot of fun driving it around to different towns all over, and, we'd actually drive the sucker all the way to Frankfurt and, come back, and that thing would do 15, 20 miles an hour. But it was a lot of fun. People would go by us looking like, what in the heck is that? And it's moving. So, but anyway, one of the powers that be over at the post decided he wanted it, and said, oh, we can't afford to keep it anymore, the insurance is too high, and this, that, and the other thing, and if it busts, then what we got, nothing. So the post, sold it to him. I think it was for $650. And I had a fit. I told them, you can't sell it. No, they sold it. So anyway, I was most unhappy about it, but it didn't do me any good. I only had one vote, and that was it.
Who was your father?
What?
Which Elliot was your father?
Dana Elliot. Yeah, and then that was Mose Elliot, and John Elliott's father was Freeman Elliot. Freeman Elliot.
Freeman.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah.
I remember John.
Oh,
I do too.
John Elliot just about broke his doctor's heart. The doctor would tell his wife Lena what to fix for him, and Lena would fix just exactly what the doctor ordered. And John got no more to eat than that, and that was it. But John would ride the rattler down through Randolph and leave up there and go upstairs, and there was a coffee shop, and cakes, and pudding, and this, that. And John would load up, and every time he came in, he'd go upstairs and have donuts and coffee, Danish and coffee, cakes. And we couldn't understand how he was gaining weight. So it's a wild story. But the funniest thing I remember was that one time we were going to Chicago Heights, and John was driving this little car that he had, and every time he'd lean a little bit forward, his tummy would blow a horn. So, that's a story that goes down in the family, you know. Let John drive, let him sit in the back seat.
That's the rattler. What's the better rattler?
Yeah, I see.
They used to rattle.
Yeah, that thing, in the good old days, that baby used to rattle, I'll kid you not. You could hear that coming miles away. Well, when I was a kid, I had the west window in my house over in the Heights, and you could hear on a nice, quiet summer night with the windows open, you could hear those doors open and close in Chicago Heights. Now, go ahead.
I hear you talk about Elliot's sons. Were there Elliot daughters?
Oh, yeah, we had, well, there were 17 children in all.
Gee.
So, let's see, Ida and Grace are the two that I remember. Now, this is another one of the ghosts in the closet, but Grace was married for one day. I don't know what happened, but I have an idea. But anyway, they had, the daughters were there, yeah, two of them that I knew. But I think there were only 7 that made it all the way through. The infant mortality rate was terrible. No matter how rich you were or anything else like that, you had no funds. It was diphtheria would go through here, typhoid would go through here. It was just uncanny. And cholera was something that everyone was scared to death of. I remember one time my father telling me about that they had found a man in the barn, and he had died. And they didn't know what to do. They rolled him on a blanket, and one of the men that was one of the workers down there, I said, "You're not doing it." He just picked him up, put him on the blanket. 5 days later, that man was dead. And you couldn't stop it. Once you got it, you were gone. Medicine didn't help one bit. There was nothing they could do to save you. And Collar would go through the camps that the railroad workers had, the canal workers had, and some of the cemeteries in Chicago, you can go right down the line, you can see who died, how many died that day, because that's the way they buried. They just buried them and wrote practically a mass grave. But the children's mortality was horrible.
You still call a lot of that consumption.
What?
Consumption is what a lot of
Yeah.
the Bibles and that recorded Bibles we call consumption.
Well,
We didn't know what it was, they died of consumption.
yeah. But the diphtheria rate was pretty good in Madison too. And most of it was because of contaminated well water and cistern water. And they would drink the cistern water because it was theoretically fresh, but it was already contaminated with ground seepage. Madison basically was a slough that had been filled in. We have problems with our flooding in town because Madison was built on such a cup. In fact, let's see where, I can't think of his name
The
right
part
now.
of the bog that runs through Park Forest where Rick Stout, or, Kedzie is?
Oh, they used to catch enough fish on that little creek that they put in concrete. They used to catch enough fish up there by the Legion. They'd put a weir there, and they'd catch fish, and they'd take them over to lawns or dead rings and have fish fries. Good enough fish fries. Everybody come, the guys would go over there, they'd catch the fish, clean them, and they'd have a big fish fry. And everyone in town that wanted to go, just went, free fish. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but it was the way the community was.
There were houses that had their effluent flow into that creek too.
Oh, yeah. The creek was heavily polluted. Yeah, and it was an easy way to get rid of the waste, and they just simply dumped it in the creek. That was the end of it. But then the rules were changed, and everybody had to hook into the sanitary, and things started to improve. Yeah. Well, I guess I jabbered long enough.
Got one more question.
Okay.
You said your family came from England. What attracted them to the United States in the first place, or where were they from in England?
No, they were from Ireland.
Ireland?
Yeah.
The potato famine?
No, John Elliot got here 1734, and he had some land up around Boston, and things weren't going exactly the way the colonists wanted them to, and we have documentation that he got mixed up with a couple of British soldiers on Breed's Hill. It's funny when you look back through the old clippings and see what happened when Harriet Chevelle, that's who James Elliot married, first came to Chicago. There were about 800 people there. That was the biggest Chicago was. And she went out to play and came back in about 20 minutes later and told her mother, there's an Indian in the ditch out there and he's dead. So they had to go call a constable, and the constable had to get a mule to get the Indian and haul him out of there and bury him. But that's the way Chicago was when my great-great-great-grandmother came. Any more shots in the dark?
Well, thank you very much. We could stay here longer and keep picking your brain. I'm so glad that we're, thank you. Let's take one. I'm glad we could videotape this because it highlights the need of oral history and to capture some of this history on tape. I think it's very important. And it's very interesting. I've lived here 20 years. I'm sure many of you have lived here longer. And it's always interesting. I'm always finding out something new about my town. And so thank you very much. I appreciate that. I got in my hand here a shop and share, and I'm gonna ask June to come up here, and she's going to say a couple of other things in terms of our birthday gifts. And, but let me just mention that, May 9th, 10th, and 11th. Oh, we're gonna have to get him up here again.
Yes, we're gonna have to get him up here. This is the photographer from the Star.
Oh, okay.
This is Dana Elliott, and maybe he can hold,
No, like that. I'm just gonna get shot by myself. Okay, go on.
A couple of these mugs are the original mugs from Elliots Park. Where are the photographs? Do the photographs?
Are you gonna donate that?
No, I don't.
Otherwise, I can give you a free picture.
My son would kill me. Oh, these are his. And the first words were when he put them down the table, said, I want them back.
Sure.
Pictures.
Oh, listen, okay, all right.
We'll just keep shooting.
All right.
But, he just said, that, you know, you got all these old bottles and everything else like that. And these are the ones he brought from home, so that nobody else could, grab onto them, and that was it.
Okay.
Okay, you got nothing?
Now, while you're here, I want Dave to come back up here and with his plaque, because,
Yeah, that would be a good one.
we want to get you up here, Dave. And
Get out of the line of fire.
no, you can stay right here. Come on up, Dave. Come on up.
Thought you were gonna dance backwards.
And, I tell you what,
That's the idea.
I'll just stand here and present that flag and also say thank you
Stand
again.
in the audience for me.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you again.
Hey, I have you looking on and explain about how folding it out to you.
Okay, we got 2 cups. They're all empty. We're drinking in village property. Is that right? All right, we're up and running now.
Okay, this is David Bell. Well, yeah, I can give you my,
Go ahead.
We're having our birthday party presents over here, if you'd like to get a picture of that. Harold, slide, you have a present in there, I saw, come and give us a present.
yeah, get into it.